If there's a 0.01% chance of something bad happening, but you're doing 1 million conversations a month, it's going to happen.
Building AI agents is one thing, but when you're dealing with huge conversation volumes, the playbook is different. I'll be in conversation with Braden Reen, CEO of Voiceflow, to explore the opportunities and implications of building AI agents at scale.
Now it's easier to build an agent, it's more cost effective, which means use cases that maybe in the past just weren't the priority, now people are starting to experiment with them.
We're at a point now where things move fast.
I think over the past 6 months, we've seen like a vibe shift from
AI agent solutions look very different depending on the use case that you're targeting. In this case, I'm thinking about size. So for one pointed specific use case, an AI agent may look a certain way. And then for enterprise or larger scale use cases, AI agents look different. I first wanted to kind of get a sense of the space here. What are smaller use case needs versus larger enterprise needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think agents is a really loaded term now. At Voiceflow, we kind of have to make sense of everything. And so we sort of have our own framework internally, right? I generally break down agents into like RPA style agents, like task automation, right? Like I want you to, when a new changelog release comes out, RSS feed gets updated, I want you to review it. I want you to generate a PDF. I want you to then send that to these people. It's not conversational, right? Or maybe it has one or two back and forths, but the main goal is really sort of task automation. The other side of it is like conversational agents. And that's going to be something like a ChatGPT. That's going to be something like a customer support agent where there's less tools involved for sure and less data manipulation, but the complexity is in the conversation, right? You know, with an RPA, it's pretty simple. You're doing the same task, often the same way, but AI is going to help you turn unstructured data inputs into structured data. Conversation is like unstructured input and unstructured response with sort of some process logic in the middle. So it's a little bit different. So that's like sort of the two broad categories that we think about. In terms of the size of the agent, it's entirely related to how big the process is. It's just enterprises care a lot more about getting things right. It's kind of like when Voiceflow was first getting started, and you've got no customers now, right? Now we've got to think about a lot. If you push a bug, no one notices, right? But the more customers you have, the more interactions, the more conversations you're having. Like for a hallucination, let's say, quote unquote, using that as a bug, people are going to notice it, right? If you have a chatbot that gives away, it says something really bad, it's a horrible hallucination, it gives away something for free, or it like puts you at legal risk because of, it says something wrong. That might not matter as much when you're super small, because if you only have 100 conversations a month or, whatever, the risks are low. It's just, whatever. But if there's a 0.01% chance of something bad happening, but you're doing 1 million conversations a month, it's going to happen, right? It's just a law of big numbers. And so that's where that like, how many decimal points of certainty do you have? And that comes from that really robust prompting. That's where that really matters, right? It's when you're dealing with scale. And so, yeah, it's like correlated to the size of the process in terms of how you lay it out for sure. But it's also correlated to how correct it needs to be. The more correct it needs to be, the more you need to break down the agent into sub-agents, more robust prompts that just cover more edge cases and things that could go wrong. It's also where QA becomes more important as well, right? So yeah, that's probably how I'd think about it.
You're touching on a subject that I was very interested about, which is as processes scale and you're trying to fit AI agent workflows to it.
Yeah.
How do like KPIs change for people that want to implement agents at scale, I guess?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to what is the goal of the agent. So for a smaller business, you probably care more about like customer experience and the agent's ability to represent your brand well as you're trying to cut through noise, right? You're a small company, you're trying to get, just off the ground. You need to have the best agent, right? The best customer experience, the most human sounding agent whatsoever. But that means you're using the more expensive models, you're using the more expensive methods. And you also might be doing a lot more like outbound calling and things like that because you're trying to generate revenue, right? I think as you get to scale, it really flips to become more of a cost optimization function because you're dealing with such large volumes that, of course, you still want to deliver a great customer experience, but you also can't do it, using the top of the line everything, right? And so I think you start to think a little bit more about your automation rate, but also doing that in a cost-effective way. I'd say the metrics of like efficiency start to break in more. I think people start thinking more about token costs, token optimization, prompt caching. That's something we typically see on the enterprise side. You also have a lot more features around like PI redaction, different compliances. Like that's when that stuff starts to sort of come into play.
Interesting. Actually, you know what? This makes me think about the things that I build too in Voiceflow, because your choice of model, for example, probably, correct me if I'm wrong, highly depends on how rigorous you're being with your prompting inside your agents.
Yeah, and like it depends on a lot of things, right? Like OpenAI models are very conversational, and I think you can even see like what the companies are focused on really matters a lot. So it's funny when I think OpenAI first launched ChatGPT and started, opening up their APIs and things. I think a lot of us felt like they were trying to become like AWS for AI, right? And I think, especially over the past 6 months, it's become more clear that they're not trying to be the next AWS, they're trying to be the next Google, where the cloud hosting business is second and their consumer apps are first, right? So they're trying to create their ecosystem of apps on top of their models. And you can even see that in how the models perform themselves. OpenAI models are multimodal, right? Which a lot of businesses don't need yet, candidly. But for consumer apps, they're incredible. They're very conversational. They're very friendly. Their tool calling is not as good as Anthropic. And I think it's partially because it reflects like they're trying to have those leading edge capabilities that really reflect well in consumer. And I think Anthropic, which again, it's what's funny is they started with different backers. Like OpenAI, obviously started with Microsoft, very enterprise heavy company, and now you've seen Anthropic get a lot closer to a lot of these hyperscalers, as I think they've focused a lot on their API side, less on the consumer side. They focus a lot on making their models incredibly performant with tool calling and like real sort of business applications. And so it's really funny how you've seen that like divergence between the two. I'd say those are like by far the two leaders at this point. I think, for a while, there's some speculation on who's going to be third. I think right now that'd be Gemini for sure, but it's still, at least in terms of adoption and demand, it's a pretty big gap between OpenAI and Anthropic. And the models, they perform completely differently. So that's sort of on like the use case side. I'd also say then the interface matters a lot. So for a chat interface, you really care about tool calling. You care about its ability to use like things like markup and all that. And typically we're seeing customers use like smarter models for chat because you can afford the latency versus with voice, you really can't. You want to make it feel as real time as possible. So people are sacrificing capabilities for speed. So you're going to see like, for example, 4.0, 4.1 on OpenAI used for voice. And then you might see something like GPT-5 with some thinking turned on for chat. It really depends on like the interface. It depends on the use case.
This is interesting. Now this is where you're getting very doing a lot of consideration for the right tool for the right use case.
Yeah.
If we take an agency perspective, right? If you're working on a complicated or process, multiple use cases, the other way that I guess projects get built out is the phases of the project, because obviously there's a lot of things to implement and touch on. And if you're in that position where you're at scale and these kind of minute changes matter more, and you're putting in more guardrails, this is, by my understanding, something that you would tackle maybe one specific thing first before going to further.
I think you almost have to break this into like two categories depending on the current state. If you have no automation in place whatsoever, I would probably recommend, like, if you look at the volume of your contact drivers, what's driving the most contact volume, and you weigh that against what would be easiest to solve first. So for most companies, 20% of the surface area of what your agent's capabilities are, be it like task automation, information automation, et cetera, is 80% of the volume, right? You know, if you're a bank, it's going to be something like card activations, reporting fraudulent purchases or charges. That's going to be like the bulk of a lot of your work. And so if you don't have any automation in place whatsoever today, it's really that weighing of like value of volume paired with how easy is it to do. So for a lot of companies, doing informational FAQs, super easy to do. You know, you're implementing your knowledge base, your RAG system, and you know, if you don't have anything set up already, you can just get that stood up. And if anyone asks about a task, you route them to a human, right? And then over time, you go through the task-based queries, and you start to like sort of bang those out one by one, right? Now we're going to do card activations. Now we're going to do X, Y, Z. So that would be if you don't have anything set up today. I think if you have an existing contact center, so traditional conversational AI was built around this system of intents. Intents are essentially like pre-LM. They still exist today, but it's a little bit different how they work. An intent is essentially a collection of sample phrases that tell a traditional natural language understanding model, what does the customer want to do? So if I took a company, it has 100 intents. I'd say maybe 20 of those are tasks. I want to activate a card. I want to report a fraudulent charge. The other 80 are like single intents for popular questions, FAQs and things. This is how the traditional systems are set up. And, you know, yes, agents have been around for, you know, kind of 2, almost 3 years now. Most companies are still running that system because they've already built it, right? There's no need to rip and replace everything, especially if it's already working, right? So if you have a traditional system, typically one intent is reserved as the fallback intent. So if the other 99 don't match, the NLU says it doesn't match any of these things, it goes to the fallback intent. And the fallback intent is going to be able to say, hey, I don't know, you know, I can't help with I can't help with that. I'm sorry. Most folks today are hooking the fallback intent up to a RAG system to actually do FAQ based off of a RAG. So they're not replacing the existing intents where they've already built a curated, directed dialogue. They're hooking up that fallback. And then now folks are starting to think, how do I go intent by intent through and have those route to an agent to do a particular task? That's because they have an existing system in place with all these intents, and like it's really laborious to do a massive rip and replace of the whole contact center. So they're kind of going through intent by intent, doing like little POCs for each one of them. You also have other folks who are doing sort of an agentic layer above the classification, which will make it a little bit easier when they want to move to a full agent framework. But it's just hard when you have live volume, live bots, tons of customers to do a big, massive all at once rip and replace. And so folks are sort of doing like a hybrid with a traditional NLU for the classification, and then having that NLU, instead of route to a directed, like scripted dialogue or flow, having that route to an agent, and they're sort of going through them one by one. That's sort of the two approaches. And if you're blank slate, you do have the benefit of, being able to adopt the latest and greatest upfront. But if you have an existing system and it's working, especially, it's going to be a lot more cost effective in agents a lot of the times. Folks are fine with that.
So on your point, what is the point during a implementation of a project, especially when it's a big one, where and you've been testing and you've been iterating and you've been evaluating, where there'll be always more to do and more to change up, but that this was a great success?
I think it's when you do enough QA testing and the agent handles like anything you throw at it with pretty good success, and it's done at a measure of cost effectiveness that you're happy with, and a level of automation and overall sort of customer success that you're happy with. Like, I think, the only way to know if your agent's good is to put it through its paces, right? You should be doing automated QA testing for sure. You should have your agents calling your agent, right? You should have it shared around the office. People should be trying to break it. That's really the only way you know. I think, again, it's just so different than traditional systems where once it was built and you could look at the flow and you could look at the responses, you knew that's how it would work, right? With agents, you don't know until you test it. And that's just such a big difference.
Absolutely. Actually, it's interesting too. I think about, any of the experience I have sort of in web development. right? Or development just in general. And once you're in that coding, programming sort of life, you get really comfortable with testing suites.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe, well, obviously you test agents, but there isn't, as far as I know, a defined kind of like standard way to say agent testing suite.
Yeah, and I think it's just because of like LLMs are just probabilistic. Like AI models are probabilistic, right? All they are is prediction machines. They predict what to say next based off what was said previously. And so doing like definitive testing on probabilistic models is really hard. And so I actually think the best way to do it is to have a probabilistic model. Like essentially, you almost have to look at it through like a data science lens. With a deterministic system, if you had one flow and you need to test one script and it went through fine, then it works. It works 100% of the time because everything was deterministic, right? But when even with NLU-based models, there's still like that's an ML model that's probabilistic. That's where most of the testing went on, and are we routing to the right intent? Because that's where the probabilism was. Once you're in a flow, we know it's going to quote unquote work. Now, customers themselves are probabilistic. Humans don't even know what they're going to say, right? We don't all just follow the same script when we go in. So that's where like some of that variance comes from. I think with LLMs, they are so probabilistic and so unpredictable that you actually have to move from this standpoint of like happy paths and like testing 4 or 5 flows. The only way to know if your thing is going to work is if you throw a ton, like you have to get to statistical relevance essentially, right? You have to do so much testing through so many random variations of user personas, test data to actually create the mapping of what your model actually performs like in the real world. It's just very different. Like if I was to sum it up, the TLDR is the more deterministic your system is, the less testing you need. Like, in development, like you only need a single test, what's a good example? Like if you're testing an endpoint, you only need like one test for it, right? For one endpoint. But the second your model is probabilistic, you need a ton of variations to see sort of how the graph, how the actual distribution sort of maps out, right? It'll end up like, ideally, you'd actually end up with a normal distribution from your QA test showing where did the deviations occur and where do you need to tighten it up, because you will never have 100% success.
Very interesting about that too is like, let's say you have a deterministic automation or a deterministic test suite, and those two things are deterministic and you'll figure it out whether it works or not.
Yeah.
But when you're in the point where you have a probabilistic system and you are testing probabilistically, you're also not just is that the case, you're in a way bigger space now. Yeah. Because conversational compared to RPA, agents give way more opportunity to interact with users or customers in a way bigger way.
Yeah, instead of running 100 calls, you probably need to run 1,000 calls, right? Like that's the only way you're going to get to certainty is by just so many reps, right? And the thing is, the reps need to be so sort of pre-LLMs, like people used to do what's called Wizard of Oz testing, where I would be given a script and I would call the bot and I would interact with the bot following my script, right? And you would do like different variations of that, and you'd get colleagues around the office to call it. But because it was a fairly deterministic system, you just didn't need that many reps. Now with the opportunity of generative AI is you can have like 10,000 calls come in and test the crap out of your bot and understand every possible deviation point. And, you get to be able to determine what is the level of deviation that I'm comfortable with to push this to production, right? That's how you should do it.
For this topic, building at scale, enterprise, agencies, all these things. I want to kind of ask you one final question that's split in two to reflect on like the future of where things are going.
Yeah.
And they're related. The first one is, how is the agency model changing as the space evolves? I guess with respect to enterprises and these big companies, but also how are enterprise opportunities evolving for automation at the same time? Because we're at a point now where things move fast.
Yeah. I think over the past 6 months, we've seen like a vibe shift from like what I would describe as like POC purgatory to like we're ready to seriously put something in production. When generative AI sort of first hit the scene in a big way, folks were very thoughtful, as they should be, right, around how to deploy this stuff and how to think about it. I think now it's becoming quite normalized. I think folks are now using it in their like personal lives a lot. I think we're understanding as like humans more about what these things are and what they're not. Like, there was a time in like 2023 when, folks thought that generative AI was going to like become like AGI, like sentient, like Skynet level AI in like 6 months, right? Like it was, the jump between ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 was so big that I think folks just extrapolated that out, right? So I think now folks are like understanding it. They're ready to put something into production. The cost has come way down. The reliability's gone way up. And it's just sort of at that place. To your second question on like where are the opportunities arising, I'm sort of a believer it's like the cost of agents the cost of building agents and deploying them and hosting them is coming down at such a clip that it's actually not like it's opening up like net new things. It's actually more it's just making things that before it didn't make sense to build an agent for because it'd be expensive to build and expensive to host. It's just like those are now becoming like coming into reach, right? So it's kind of like when the price of airline tickets came down, or it was the price of like air travel came down, jet fuel became cheaper, planes become more accessible. You would think that like as the ticket prices came down, you would have like the airlines go to business, but instead it's actually people just flew more places and they flew more often, right? And so I think agents are sort of similar now, where a couple of years ago it would be millions of dollars to build like a true contact center agent, like millions and millions of dollars. And now it's like you could go build a contact center agent for an order of magnitude less. And so what that means is, yes, you're going to save money there, but most folks are saying, well, what else can I now do, right? Because it's always been revenue accretive. Otherwise, you would never build these things in the first place, right? ROI accretive. And so now you're like, oh, hey, it's going to cost me 10 times less to build. I'm still getting the ROI from that thing. So where can I go put that extra money to do even more automation, right? And so I think you're seeing people get into like outbound calling. You're seeing people get into like proactive deflection. So like not just customer support where you wait for the customer to come in, but you actually reach out to them proactively. Hey, I saw you were on our support page, or I saw you made a Shopify purchase, and then I saw you on my like refunds page. Shoot you a text message before you even get to a human, right? Like you're starting to see like more like ideas like that pop up because now it's easier to build an agent. It's more cost effective, which means use cases that maybe in the past just weren't the priority. Now people are starting to experiment with them. So I think it's the enterprise level. I think at the agency side, yeah, I think what's really tough with AI agencies is the stack is changing so often. And I think there's often like a shiny object syndrome around like whatever the latest and greatest tool is. I think sometimes there's this feeling that like the tool is what makes the whatever brush you choose is what makes the painter. I just don't believe that's true. I think like, for a lot of folks, I'd recommend just like choose a tool and stick with it. Everyone's moving pretty fast, right? Like you might have a feature gap that's momentary. But I'll tell you this, like if any company ever launches a thing that at Voiceflow we go, wow, that's like incredibly cool, like customers would love that, we're going to have that in a couple weeks, right? Like it's really not hard to build software and sort of the age of AI. And so I'd say, yeah, pick a tool and learn it deeply because they're all going to have the same capabilities at the end of the day. And it really comes down to the reliability. Do you like the design? And I don't mean the visuals. I mean, like, do you like how the tool's laid out? Like, how are they thinking about who they serve? And is that you? I think these are all the things that are going to matter in the end when the parity of features gets so tight between all the different tools that it's ultimately going to come down to like pricing, the ecosystem and community around it, the education around it, and then your just preference of tool. You know, some people like, what's a good example? Maybe less these days, but some people like Sketch and some people like Figma. That used to be more of a choice. It's less of a choice these days, but it just comes down to preference. And I'd say like switching tools constantly is not. I think all the vendors are seeing that. Like, there's just a lot of like people who are trying a ton of different things, but at the end of the day, everyone's going to have similar features if it's value accretive. So, something to think about.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And also, I think that's amazing insight. And we covered so much in the enterprise and the agency space.
Yeah.
I think that's a wrap on episode 1.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here, Brent. Appreciate it.
Cool.